Good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's webinar. Really appreciate you turning out for the session. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Nick Marshall. I'm the Program Officer at Southwest Sport. My role is primarily, I'm responsible for club development support. So any questions or queries you might have related to club development, whether it be advice around grants, policy development, governance support or strategic planning, please feel free to get in contact with me at any time and anyone at Southwest Sport, and we'll be sure to help you out where we can. As you're aware, tonight we're going to focus on looking at the functions of club committees and some of the sort of fundamental roles and responsibilities of office bearers. To elders past, present and emerging, and acknowledge any First Nations people attending the session tonight, and acknowledge the contribution that First Nations people make to the clubs and communities that we're involved in every day. So tonight's session will focus on the fundamental ideas and concepts of both being a committee member and some of the more specific roles of being a president. If you're an experienced committee member, this session will hopefully act as a bit of a refresher for you. And if you're new to a committee, the hope is that the session will provide you with a simple introduction to your new role. We'll start with the roles and responsibilities of the general committee as a start, and then move on to some of the specific roles and responsibilities of the president following that. We'll have some questions at the end, question time at the end as well. So before we dive in, just touch on the standard composition of a committee and what it looks like. So there are generally 4 titled office bearers: the president, the vice president, secretary and treasurer. And additionally, there can be any number of general committee members. So 3 to 5 is fairly common, but these numbers can vary from club to club. Some will have more committee members, some will have less. And depending on your club's rules, some people may hold 2 titled office bearers positions. So this is more common for smaller clubs, where they may have a secretary / treasurer as an example. As you might be aware as well, a committee may be known by other names. They may be referred to as like a board or a committee of management. For the purpose of this session, I'll use the term committee as a generic way of covering that. And as you're likely aware, committees can support a wide range of different sporting organisations, whether it's a club, an association, a league, a society. For the purpose of this evening, I'll use the word club as a generic title to encompass all different types of organisations. But yeah, whatever title you use, the basic responsibility of the committee is to look after the club's affairs and ensure the club complies with all legal duties under the Associations Incorporation Reform Act that was published in 2012. So tonight we're going to start with the roles and responsibilities of the general committee members. The reason for this is that whether or not you have a titled office bearer's role, such as a president or a treasurer, first and foremost, you are a committee member. So this initial information is really relevant to everyone sitting on the committee. As far as primary responsibilities, we'll go step by step through each of them. And these are some of the key ones that we've sort of identified, which are most important. So probably first and foremost, it's really important that you're familiar with your club's constitution, rules and model rules. For those that aren't familiar, a constitution or sort of your model rules is a constitution sets out the purpose and the rules of your sports club. It's the basic document which ensures that your club is operating legally under the Incorporated Associations Reform Act. It outlines things like the purpose of your club, which is really important, processes and procedures that guide the club's compliance with proper governance, general rights of members, things like disciplinary and grievance procedures, and powers of the committee, and then helps with financial matters and the documents required by Consumer Affairs, which are generally submitted by the Secretary. For any new committee member, it's the best starting point for any committee member in terms of getting familiar with your responsibility and role. Second primary responsibility that we've identified is the requirement to assist the club in achieving its purpose. So the purpose features, as I sort of mentioned, in the club's constitution. As a committee member, the club's purpose or purposes should be at the forefront of any decision making. and really guide decisions that the committee make as a whole. Another thing that committee members really need to be familiar with is their club policies and bylaws. So these are standalone documents that complement the constitution or the rules. Bylaws are generally more operational in nature and have less to do with legal requirements of the club. They generally sit outside the constitution, but it's really essential that they don't contradict the constitution, because the constitution is obviously that legal document, legally binding document, and then the bylaws sort of assist with operational side of your club's operations. So things like how often the committee meets, how teams maybe are formed, identifying age groups, things like the details of the club's colours or dress codes, and clearance processes and that sort of thing. Alongside that, policies really help provide a safe environment for members. So these are things like child safety and member protection. These things help us ensure that we're providing a really safe and inclusive environment for our members. Policies can be either developed by club club committees, sorry, or quite often governing bodies will have some sort of will have policies developed that can be adopted by their respective clubs. Generally speaking, if the constitution doesn't have an answer for you, you can look to your club's policies or bylaws for a bit of guidance. Next responsibility, I suppose, is supporting office bearers in the execution of their responsibilities. Good committees support one another in their duties, and some tasks are better off shared rather than being held responsible for just by one person. So, for example, the classic example is the role of the treasurer. There's a sort of common preconception that the treasurer is responsible for all the financial decisions. This is not the case. The case is that the treasurer can provide insight into the financial status of the club, but it's the responsibility of the entire committee to make informed decisions about the finances. Again, in regards to finances, it's really important that the General Committee is responsible for monitoring and managing the club's financial viability. As mentioned with regards to the treasurer, it's not just the treasurer's responsibility. The treasurer provides sort of collates the information for the committee, but as I said, it's the committee's responsibility to make sure they're managing the funds appropriately. Abiding by legal obligations. So as we mentioned, the Constitution helps guide the committee in maintaining their legal obligations, and we'll discuss in a little bit more detail some of the sort of primary ideas and legal obligations. For the most part, they're common sense and easy to adhere, but it's important that we sort of discuss them quickly and provide some detail on them. These abiding by legal obligations just help maintain the integrity of the club and help be accountable to one another. As I said before, the committee as a whole entity is responsible for making decisions on behalf of the club. Aside from special resolutions or election of committee members where members will elect their respective committees, or special resolutions where it's a responsibility of the entire club membership to make a vote, the majority of decisions are made by the committee. And again, the committee that you find that balance that helps the club prosper. So as far as actions are concerned, first and foremost, it's really important that you've read and understand your club's constitution or rules or model rules. So depending on what rules are in place for your club, if you haven't already, highly advise getting your hands on a copy of whatever your club has and going through it so that you have a good understanding of your legal obligations. Moving on to some of those legal obligations, again, as a committee member, there's sort of 4 primary legal obligations. And again, as we discuss them, you'll notice that they're fairly self-explanatory in a sense and mainly based on common sense and delivering common sense ideas for your club. Key responsibility of committee is to, as far as in terms of legal obligations, is to first duty is to duty of acting in good faith. So this is this entails acting with integrity and acting within the best interest of the organisation. So essentially assisting the organisation achieve its purpose. So again, acting in good faith means not acting for your own benefit or for the benefit of people that are members, for specific members. It's about generating decisions that are beneficial to the entire organisation. So again, as a committee member, it's important that you make sure the organisation is only doing things that are permitted by the organisation's rules and purposes. As we sort of discussed earlier, it's really important that the purpose of your organisation should really guide your decisions. The next duty is the duty to act with reasonable care and skill and diligence. So you'll probably find that, again, these 4 duties are common sense, and you'll find that they'll overlap a lot as well. But they're important to understand by themselves as well. So first and foremost, in regards to reasonable care, know the organisation's financial position and ensure the committee takes action if there's a concern about whether there's debts that can't be paid, ensuring that the club remains solvent throughout their duration. As I sort of mentioned before, every member of the committee must do this rather than leaving it entirely to the treasurer. Also important that you're conscientious of your organisation activities, policies and affairs. A part of your duty to act with reasonable care, skill and diligence is ensuring that you're attending committee meetings. As we sort of discussed before, even if you're not at a committee meeting, if a decision's made and you're not in attendance, that you're still responsible or accountable for that decision that's made. Some responsibilities that generally get left to the secretary, but that again should be the responsibility of the entire committee, are things like ensuring the organisation maintains its records and ensuring that the committee and the organisation is regularly reporting to CAV accurately and on time. Again, you'll probably see a bit of a recurring theme here. The next duty is duty not to improperly use information or position. So again, being in a position of power, it's important that you're maintain the confidentiality of some information. Don't misuse information acquired by virtue of holding office to gain advantage for yourself or any other person. Some points of discussion within committee meetings may be of a confidential nature, and it's important to maintain confidentiality outside of the committee if necessary. Again, important that you don't make improper use of your office to gain advantage of the committee of the club's position. A common one, for example, if the club's looking to hire a potential candidate for a role in the club, it's important that you don't sort of give friends inside word on job opportunities unless you've been asked to sort of actively look for people. Otherwise, there's sort of as you sort of say, an improper use of information that you've gained from being inside the committee. The final one is a duty to disclose and manage conflicts of interest. A conflict of interest arises when a committee member who has a duty to act in best interest of the organisation is presented with the opportunity or potential to use their position in the committee for their own personal benefit. Again, similar to that improper use of information, that overlapping idea that any decision that's made should be with the best interests of the club. And again, if you're in a position where there's potential for you to be conceived as displaying conflict of interest, it's important that you disclose it, and the club and the committee can manage it appropriately. So conflict of interest situations often arise in non-for-profit organisations and are not necessarily prohibited, but there's obviously a duty of care to ensure that you manage them appropriately and act accordingly. As a committee member, if you identify conflict of interest, you must disclose it, and as a committee, manage it appropriately. A key way that many committees do this is by having a conflict of interest register, and this is a standing agenda item on any committee meetings. And at the start of each meeting, for example, the committee members will identify if they have any potential conflicts of interest, and that'll be recorded and documented. And then this helps if a topic arises where that conflict of interest might become threatened, then they can address that when at an appropriate time. A lot of legal obligations can be a bit confusing and complicated at times. For more information on these, Justice Connect's got a really clear duties guide. Again, all the resources from tonight will be available following the session. I'll provide a link to this resource. It provides a pretty succinct summary of all the duties that we've sort of covered there, those 4 key ones, and sort of identifies how they overlap. They've just sort of said a lot of these things are common sense. So essentially, if something doesn't feel right, discuss it with the committee, address it, check your club rules, your policies, your bylaws, and this will help guide you with your decisions and proper governance of the club. Another core responsibility of the committee is setting the cultural tone of the club. What does the club stand for? This will also likely be spelled out in your club purposes, but you can take this further and develop a strong, inclusive, positive culture. So primarily, General Committee is really responsible for developing and promoting that positive club culture. Important that the General Committee encourage a diverse range of committee members. You really want the committee to be representative of the community in regards to age, gender, ethnicity, to ensure the club has multiple voices. In particular, there's a growing push for young people to become involved at the committee level, provide opportunities just so that we're getting a sense of the younger demographic of views. So obviously the legal age that you can be on a committee is 18, so you have to be over 18. But if you can provide opportunities to younger people and provide proper education and induction processes to the committees, then they can provide a valued voice. Again, in regards to club culture, installing policies, strategies, and programs that promote an inclusive and safe environment are really important. One of the really prominent ones at the moment is obviously child safety policies that can be adopted from governing bodies. And there's also a number of templates that are available through Club Help. General Committee members, it's really important that they're ensuring the activities and programs align with the club's purpose. This all keeps coming back to that idea of promoting that positive culture. Further to that, it's important that the activities and programs align with the community values as well, and that they're reflective of the community that you live in. And the final one that we've got here, in terms of the General Committee, it's really important that you encourage a balanced discussion amongst the committee members. Really important that not just one single person's having a voice, giving everyone a chance to speak out about give their opinion, give their ideas, and provide that sort of positive two-way communication, making sure that we're all really receptive to one another's ideas and thoughts. As far as desirable attributes for General Committee members, primarily any person willing to learn is good candidate to be a committee member. There are sometimes a lot of information to take on board, but anyone that's willing to take that time and is committed to the club will be a benefit to the committee. Interpersonal skills are really key. As we mentioned, having really open discussions, so being able to listen and communicate effectively are really important and crucial attributes to any good committee member. An understanding of basic financial practices is beneficial. Again, not essential to come in with that knowledge firsthand, but a willingness to learn and understand it if you are new to a committee is a really positive trait. Again, discussed about the culture of the club, ensuring that you're demonstrating the values that the club hold, and being a positive role model is really key. Critical and forward thinking. The committee as a whole is responsible, as we sort of discussed, about in regards to the future planning of the club, committed to the betterment of the club. So obviously, people that are members of the committee, they have to have the club at the forefront of all the decisions, and ensuring that any decision they make is going to improve the club's value. The final one I've got here is time management skills. As we sort of discussed, it's quite common for committee members to have a role in the committee as well as have a game day or day-to-day operational volunteer role with the committee. So being able to manage those two responsibilities, those two hats, is really important. Being on a committee is a responsibility that shouldn't be taken lightly, and it is a genuine time commitment. And then especially if you do have a volunteer role, an operational role with the club. So managing the balance between these roles is really important. I'll go through this one pretty quickly as far as basically covered all this pretty well, but just some basic tips for new committee members. As I said, read and familiarise yourself with the club constitution or the rules, or if your club has adopted the model rules. Bylaws and the policies are all really important documents to be familiar with. And if you're unsure about anything, they're a good point of reference to return to. For a new committee member, listen, watch and observe at meetings initially. If you are new to the committee, understand the dynamics of the committee and the different people that are involved. One sort of thing we've identified, if you're a new committee member, is take the opportunity to debrief with other committee members. They might be able to provide you with a bit more insight, give you a bit more in-depth knowledge of the processes if you're a bit unfamiliar, especially with the ideas of inductions. If you have opportunities to have a proper induction, that's a really beneficial process for new members. But if you don't have that available, definitely debriefing with other committee members after meetings is really beneficial to your learning. Similar to that, where possible, if you're sort of if you can shadow a specific office bearer in terms of succession planning, give yourself an opportunity to sort of follow that specific person around, understand the role before you're forced to take it on potentially. Just give you that insight into what's required. And again, take time to adjust to being a committee member. A good committee will give you an opportunity to share your voice, even if you are new, because obviously any new insights can be beneficial. But again, don't feel like you have to change the club in a single day as you join a club. Join a committee, give yourself some time to adjust and understand the dynamics and the processes. Just in terms of the current situation, obviously navigating COVID, the hope is that we're getting closer to the end of it, but there are challenges that are still around today and will continue for some time. But as a committee, it's important that we focus on identifying what you can control. So again, looking forward to preparing for when things can return to activity is a good thing to think about, and preparing for those. So again, looking forward, establishing plans for when you can activate, and establish contingency plans for when things can't go ahead. Stay informed with current restrictions and associated dates. The other one that's really key during lockdowns especially is maintaining regular communication between the committee. Obviously, there's a number of platforms that can be used, whether it's Teams or Zoom, or even just as simple as maintaining an email chain or a message group or even just phone calls if that's the preferred option. Any sort of regular communication between the committee just to continue sharing ideas, debriefing with one another, and just checking in on one another is really important for the committee's well-being as well as the club's. As far as a potential action that the club can consider is the development of a temporary COVID-19 response subcommittee. Again, the hope is that we'll be able to come out of this in the near future, but while we are still managing it, having a subcommittee that's geared directly towards addressing those situations is a positive action that the club can take. Also important from a committee's perspective that we do take positives from this year. Obviously, from a winter sport perspective, we may not have had a full season, but the opportunity to play some games here and there is important to focus on those. The positive side of things, and that'll sort of buoy us going forward. For the purpose of this session, I'm not going to distinguish or separate the role of president and vice president completely. Whether you're a president or vice president of your club, the following principles and responsibilities will apply in varying degrees. So as I said before, everyone's responsible for supporting one another, and strong committees will have a president and vice president that work cohesively together and are bound by, and they're often bound by some form of succession planning that are in the process. So yeah, as I sort of say, the vice president should be as much across the club operations and planning as a president would be. So a common theme across office bearer roles is that, yeah, while you do have specific responsibilities, you should not be doing everything by yourself. Good committees, as I sort of will continue to reiterate throughout the sessions, will support one another in all their roles and ensuring that everyone's maintaining their responsibilities. Some of the key responsibilities that we sort of identify with presidents and the vice president are leading annual and future planning of the club. So developing future-proofing policies and procedures, and then monitoring the progress as they're played out. So one of these forms of future planning is strategic planning. These are obviously sort of 3 to 5 year plans that the club can helps guide the decisions of the club and the committee going forward for the next 3 to 5 years. Again, financial planning is a really important role of the entire committee, as we've sort of spoken about. The final one that's really important is succession planning. It's a significant part of future-proofing for your club. These are often overlooked. It's not uncommon to hear stories of clubs that have struggled to overcome the sudden loss of a president because the club has had no succession plans or induction procedures to follow to assist incoming presidents or committee members. So as part of president's role, it's important that they lead those planning ideas. The next responsibility I've got listed here is environmentally observant. So when talking about environmental observance or awareness, not talking about sort of flora or fauna by any means, but more speaking about being aware of current trends in your sporting environment. So what are other clubs doing? What are the leagues doing? What are the governing bodies doing? Speaking with other presidents from other clubs or other like organisations to get a sense of the common challenges and opportunities that are currently available. So that sort of environmental scanning is really important. Sharing knowledge is key to sharing and acquiring knowledge from other organisations and the environment more generally is really important to a club's development and growth. Another one, leading the monitoring of compliance with legal obligations. Obviously, discuss the duties of the committee and just ensuring that you're setting the example for the committee members. Again, monitor committee and club performance. Again, you sort of have to lead the way, be the role model for managing and addressing goals. Common one that's often the responsibility of presidents is being the club spokesperson and the advocate for the club. So generally responsible for speaking on behalf of the club in public settings or in seeking support from the public or other stakeholders, or advocating for support from other organisations to invest in resources that will support your club in achieving its purpose is really important. So this is probably one of those areas where potentially the vice president might not necessarily take on this role, but certainly if the president's not available, then this is something the vice president can fill in and facilitate. President's really important in has a really important role in facilitating meetings. They often set the agendas and ensure efficient and effective management of the meetings, and they're really key in leading that balanced discussion between everyone, giving people a voice, giving people an opportunity to share their ideas, giving people a voice and a platform to share their ideas is really important. And the final one I've got here is just providing informative updates to members. So similar to the responsibilities associated with being the spokesperson of the club, from an external perspective, it's also important that you're the spokesperson of the club in a internal setting as well. Really important to use multiple platforms as well, whether it's your Thursday night teas or club newsletters or one-on-one conversations with people. It's important that you're sharing all the information that you have. Social media and emails, letters to members is really important. So additional responsibilities, as mentioned, the president can't be expected to do everything. So all of these responsibilities can be shared, and part of the president's responsibility is delegating these roles as well amongst the committee and amongst other volunteers within the organisation or the club. So as sort of discussed, something you might have noticed throughout the presentation is that I haven't really discussed the committee or the president as being responsible for coordinating the day-to-day or the game day operations of a club. By definition, the committee, the primary responsibility of the committee is not to do the day-to-day operations. In an ideal structure, and again, in an ideal structure, the day-to-day operations would fall to a general manager of the club. But obviously, for the majority of local sporting clubs and associations, the idea of having a general manager to coordinate that sort of thing is not really realistic and sort of beyond expectation. So as a result, clubs are often really reliant on the committee members being heavily involved in coordinating the day-to-day operations of the club. If this is the case, and often it is the case for small clubs, really important that the president and the committees are willing to share and delegate their roles so that they're not overwhelmed by their sort of volunteer roles. And again, finding that balance between game day tasks, operational side of things, and their sort of primary role, which is the future planning and future proofing of the club. Again, club president's responsible for sort of leading the annual report and review of the club annually, monitoring the progress of any goals that they've set for themselves. Again, represent the club at league and association meetings and forums. Again, they don't necessarily have to be the delegate of the club, but quite often they have the best understanding or will have a really good understanding of the club's position and what goals they're pursuing, and they can direct any conversations at a high level to what their club's trying to achieve. Again, another common one is they're often the stakeholder point of contact. So stakeholders include sponsors, the local government authorities, the league or the governing body of your sport, and obviously your members as well. So management of these relationships is obviously really important to clubs and a responsibility that the president can take on. We'll just quickly touch on some of the desirable attributes. Obviously, being personable and easy to approach is really key. Again, we want to have someone that's balanced and reflects good qualities. Again, good public speaker, someone that can address crowds as well as individuals. Again, obviously they're part and parcel of the committee and in coordinating the club's culture, so they have to really live by the culture that they're developing with the committee. Good working knowledge of the club rules and policies. So again, coming back to that idea of first and foremost, knowing your club's rules. Again, sound communicator, similar to public speaking, being able to communicate ideas and articulate things that are important to the club and being able to share those with other stakeholders to help them support you in the club's pursuit. As I said, good listener is really crucial. Being able to take on ideas and being receptive to ideas is really important. Forward thinking is also really critical. So looking ahead, trying not to get bogged down too much in the day-to-day operations of the club and giving yourself an opportunity to plan for the club's future and lead that planning is really key. Again, fair-minded, being receptive to ideas, sort of one-in-one, go hand in hand here. The final thing I'm going to show you is the sort of estimated time commitment we'd sort of expect of a club, and probably some of you will look at this and maybe laugh at the figures we've got, but there's sort of the numbers that have been identified if you are just focusing on that future planning and club sustainability side of things. But obviously, in reality, presidents and the committee are doing a lot of volunteer roles as well behind the scenes, behind the committee as well. So 4 to 10 hours is probably on the smaller side of things than you expect, but that's if you're committing to just that future planning and future sustainability of the club, then that's how much time you can commit to that, and then potentially the rest of the time that you have available is maybe the time that you can commit to the operational or the game day tasks that you have to fulfill as well. But again, really important that we're sharing those responsibilities. Again, I'll touch on club presidents navigating COVID and the sort of responsibilities during this time. As we sort of said, sharing the load is really important, and not sort of taking on all the responsibilities. So again, as we sort of discussed, potentially developing a COVID-19 sort of subcommittee that can sort of help in focusing on that area as it's an ongoing challenge. Again, leading the preparations for a return to activity when the opportunities are available. And again, part of that is delegating, coordinating the return to activity. Again, supporting members is really important during this time. So again, setting that example. Mental health is a really prominent concern for the nation during COVID. So clubs that are starting with committees should be looking at ways in which they can maintain connection with their members, and checking on their members where they can. Developing really sound lines of communication that can keep people connected is something that we need to continue to do as we progress through it. Again, part of that is also communicating updates to club members, being really clear in what's currently happening. And then again, as we sort of mentioned with committee, identifying tasks that can be undertaken while the club is in lockdown. So again, that's the sort of future planning side of things. So thinking about strategic planning, operational planning, financial planning, and the other one that I've got there is brainstorming innovative ways to raise funds with the committee. Again, as I sort of mentioned with the committee, it's important that we take away the positives from this year. Even though we are still being challenged by the issues associated with COVID, it's important that we identify the positives when they do occur and share those positive events with the club and with one another, and that'll again help buoy us going forward. So again, some strengths of some good committees, just to sort of summarise. Good committees will monitor and review their effort, set goals, monitor progress. Monitoring the progress of clubs should be a standing agenda item that clubs are constantly referring to. Good committees will also seek regular feedback from their members and stakeholders. Really important that good committees often are acknowledging and addressing their weaknesses. For example, if your club's struggling with participation, developing strategies and financial advice that might benefit that is really important. Again, good committees will keep on doing that sort of environmental scanning and observation, identifying what other clubs and associations are doing well, and that'll help you track towards improving your club as a whole. Again, planning for the future, not just coordinating the day-to-day operations is crucial to any good committee. Again, providing a diverse committee that's representative of your club and giving voices to all members of the community. Again, as I sort of mentioned, providing equal opportunities for men and women, encouraging younger voices on the committee. At the moment, there's a real heavy push to get the voices of younger people involved in committees to get that perspective. And then another good strength is in terms of that succession planning, providing opportunities for new incoming committee members and giving them an appropriate induction and shadowing process that can help them feel comfortable in the space. Finally, just a few takeaway thoughts. For new committee members, familiarise yourself with your club's constitution, as I said. Give yourself time to become familiar with fellow committee members and the dynamics of the committee. And then where the opportunities are, make sure you shadow fellow committee members and office bearers. For presidents and vice presidents, obviously you're responsible for leading the future planning and sort of keeping the ship on track, as it were. Establish and support succession planning. That's really key to developing a stable and ongoing committee. And then obviously be a positive role model for members of the committee. Share the load, be receptive to ideas, and maintain that balance between the future planning and the operational day-to-day. These are the resources, essentially where all the information I've generated tonight has come from these resources. If you have any follow-up questions at any time, please get in touch.